I'd like to call to order the Thursday, February 22nd, 2018 Budget Committee meeting. And if we could, as usual, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. The last meeting we adjusted some of the language which is on our agenda in terms of, roll call. Excuse me, thank you. I was excited.
Roll call. Mr. Paul?
Present.
Mrs. Jocelyn?
Present.
Michael Dakotas? Present. Mr. McNally?
Present.
Mr. Edwards?
Present.
Mr. Katz?
Present.
Mr. Cody? Absent is Mrs. Roshley, Mrs. Hollenbach, Mrs. Janik, and Mr. Leonard. Thank you.
And I know Cecil had mentioned that he would not be able to make it. Jennifer Rashley is going to be here at some point. I don't know if we know of others.
And Mrs. Hollenbach said she couldn't make it, and Mrs. Janik called me. She could not make it.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, as I started, we had discussed as a committee how we wanted to deal with public comment, and it's spelled out on the agenda, but that we will allow it throughout the meeting for people recognized by the chair, and trying to limit comments to issues related to this budget that we're working on. For people who wish to speak, to address the committee with their name and where they live, that we'll do a 3-minute time limit. And if people have any other kind of matters that they'd like to submit for us to consider, if they could submit that to the town clerk so that we can get that, consider that to see if we could put it on a future agenda. So what I'd like to do is we have a few departments, budget items that will be presented, and after each one of those, if we had some public comment, then I'll invite people to come forward if there is any. So unless there's any reason not to, Nancy, maybe if you could help, is the order that we have in the agenda. If there's any compelling reason to kind of move things around, I'd be happy to change it, but great. So the first presentation that we'd like to discuss is the rubbish and recycling. We just handed around the latest version of the budget worksheet that has been provided us by Nancy Mello, the town administrator, town council. So this is dated at the top right, February 17th, 2018 in red. And so
I just want to ask, on these sheets, some of the numbers are in red. What does that indicate?
That just indicates that the council has actually voted on those numbers.
Okay, so that'll be cumulative.
So I'm
And
really giving you what, yes.
Okay.
It'll be, they actually have a meeting scheduled for this Saturday, and Monday night at the council meeting, they have 7 or 8 other department balances that you get a vote on. So hopefully by next week, you'll have pretty much, they will have seen, reviewed, and voted on most of the budget numbers.
excellent, great. Okay, great. So the first one that we'd like to be educated on is the rubbish and recycling. That is account number 5500, and can be found on page 11 of this new document. And I don't believe in the notebooks that we had any backup on that.
I have some back.
Great.
for you.
Thank you.
And I do apologize for Mr. Anderson has a prior commitment tonight. he has been, I think, before you already, but the rubbish and recycling had not been addressed. Pretty much this is contractual anyway, but he has done a spreadsheet for us. He's got the notes on the bottom, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I will say that the council has approved a number of $724,900. If you look at his fiscal, he spread out for several years what the contract would require. And under the fiscal 2019, you're gonna see his total is $722,400. The difference that the council put in for the 724 is because note number 4 indicates that the diesel, the change in the diesel fuel, we do have to pay that. Currently, he's running about 3,000 this year over, and we have to pay for whatever that rate and change in diesel is. You know, last year that we, most of you that were on the budget committee, know last year that we deferred some of the payment over, and that amount is $4,700 a month. We have to pay that for 30 months to meet the shortage that we had on the, for the contract last year. So for the fiscal 19, that would amount to $56,400. And the rest is all contractual, along with that.
Could you explain that one more time, so I could write it down? I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
the, last year, well, that's right, if you weren't on the budget committee last year, the trash contracts that came in were all higher than what, obviously, there wasn't budgeted money. So what they did was agreed with the contractor that they would accept the financing that we had available, the funds that we had available for that year. And the second, third, and fourth year of the contract, we're gonna absorb at a higher amount. So it's listed here as a deferred payment, but it was actually on the contract accepted for the first year, and then this amount with that deferred payment in it was accepted for the second year. So it's the $666,000 plus $4,700 a month that we're gonna have to pay for 30 months to come up with what we were short for last year. So for that fiscal, that $4,700 a month comes to $56,400. And it brings it to $722,400. And note number 4 tells you that the difference for the fuel also has to be accounted for. We have to pay whatever the difference in the cost of the diesel fuel from what we budget to what the actual price is. So that is why when you look at the council, they actually approved $724,900, and that's what they'd like you to consider.
So Nancy, the 56.4 for 18, 19, 19, 20, and then the 28.2 for 2021, that's all shortage to make up for last year, correct?
Yes,
basically spread out
the
over the
actual
3 years.
cost of the second, we spread the cost out so much that we had, they were willing to take what we had budgeted for the first year, and then the second and third, fourth year were gonna be higher. Also, I should mention that there is a CPI adjustment for the actual cost on the contract of the $666,000, but it was agreed that on the second year, it would be 0. They would not charge for that. So if you notice in your spreadsheet, where it says CPI adjustment estimate under fiscal 19, you're gonna see 0. But under fiscal 20, it will stop being 2.4. But for this year, this coming year, fiscal 19, you're not gonna have that adjustment.
CPI is what again?
The CPI adjustment estimate.
What does the CPI stand for? I'm sorry.
co-
Consumer price index.
Inflation.
Inflation.
Nancy, why does it drop in fiscal '21?
Why does it drop
Yeah.
in fiscal '21? Oh, I don't
Add them
know
both together
that
at the
far out.
bottom.
It looks like something may not be calculating. So the top row is giving us a 666,000, and we have an increase, but when you get into that,
Maybe it was supposed to be 7?
it could be.
I think that is only calculated to the end of the 30 months of the deferred monthly option. See, we would still owe the 28,200, and I believe the cost of the contract part will be renegotiated at that time. But we're still gonna owe that balance, which is that deferred portion of the payment. See, the 28,200? Because it would be 6 more months.
So it's basically in fiscal year 2021, we know for sure we have to pay 350. It's quite likely we're gonna have some number up above,
Right.
but it's not included in it right now.
I think what he did
Okay.
was just include it for the 6 months. That's half of the amount, because we still have 6 months of that deferred payment.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions about rubbish and recycling collection? Great. Thank you. And then item 3, we're looking at the recreation department. And I was assuming that the account numbers that we would be hitting would be the 8790 beaches, is that? And then
Yes.
also the 8830, the summer recreation.
Right.
Is that-
And they
those
did
for
review
every-
those.
Great. And those are on page 13. For those following, and then also in our workbooks, Nancy's done a great job of providing us with some detail.
It's really not me.
Her predecessor. So if it's not good, she doesn't take any credit. Go ahead.
It's at
Oh,
the
All
very
the way in the
end.
back, thank you. I knew I saw it.
The very back.
Recreation.
And the council did review that, but on the beaches, they're gonna be readdressing that again, because we're still getting information in as to, if you recall, last year, they weren't able to open Grinnell's for a good part of the time for the work, and this year, they actually started, I believe, on the abutment, and so that parking lot may not be available throughout the entire summer, so they're not quite sure. They're working with the DPW director and whatnot to see just how many weeks of the summer they're gonna be able to utilize Grinnell's Beach. They did, though, in their presentation, I think Chris Romeline was going to try to make it here tonight. He is the chair of the Recreation Commission, but he wasn't sure he was gonna be able to get here. But they did, so the beaches, we couldn't do a lot with, because, like I say, you only have, basically, last year we budgeted for the Fogland Beach to open, but not necessarily they're also talking on the fees for beach fees and implementing different fees for this. But on the summer recreation program, the 8830, the park programs, the activity programs they have for the summer are pretty much neutral. The cost of the programs pretty much pay, and in some cases, town even comes up a little bit ahead, because most of them are all private vendors that offer the services.
And could you go, Nancy, going back, so for the beaches, the 8790 account, the request as of now is for 25,500. And does that assume a full season of Grinnell being open? And your comments were,
No.
maybe it won't, or?
No, it does not, because they were unsure as to, and we still are unsure as to how much of the season Grinnell will be open. The hope is, while they're working on the abutment, the bridge abutment, because they're gonna be staging their trucks and whatnot in the parking lot. You can't have, the beach open with that, but the hope is that the town owns some land across the street, and they may be able to park some of the big equipment across the street. If that happens, we may have limited parking there, but we might be able to utilize some parking. So they are working out that plan, and in fact, the Recreation has hosted a meeting for February 27th, next Tuesday night, and they're going to be discussing more of that as to how much we can utilize that beach, because that has the impact on the salaries for the, the lifeguards. It's worth putting the lifeguards and the gatekeepers. We are making most of the money, obviously, at Fogland. We always do. And that beach, of course, is being renovated there, so that work is still continuing, so it may not all be done by May. Because I believe Memorial Day is when they open up.
But from what for the current fiscal year that we're in, the approval was for $15,000, and the request goes up to 23, which
Right.
is pretty consistent with what it was in FY17. So did FY17 Grinnell wasn't open either?
No, a lot of it had to do with, let me see, they had discussed all this. In 17, Grinnell's Beach was open, but the fees and whatnot, and were covering, they weren't covering on the salary part. So I'm not quite sure where that goes with it, but I can tell you, they said, we are not sure how much that beach is. That's why that number isn't in red yet, because we're just
Okay.
not comfortable.
We also have Mr. Perry here. I don't know if I can call you out, because I know you sit with them, correct, as liaison? So you might be able to answer that?
Yeah, last year, we only opened Grinnell's Beach for 3 weeks at the end of the season, so it was not open all summer.
And we're not anticipating full summer this year.
Yeah, we're not, unless the project that's going on now gets done in June, but I don't foresee that happening. So that's why that figure just went up a little bit, because we didn't open Grinnell's at all last year for 3 weeks. Last 3 weeks of this season is when we opened it.
Great, thank you. But it went up quite a bit. I mean, the salary goes from 15 to 23, so, and can take it if it's still preliminary, but.
Well, we did do something different last year. We doubled up on the lifeguards on the weekends at Fogland, and we doubled up on the gate attendants, because the attendance was so outrageous, we had to. So that's why it went up a little compared to the previous year.
He's right, and that was
So-
mentioned. Because with Grinnell's Beach being closed, we were getting.
A lot more
really
people.
Getting a lot more. And because Fogland is a popular beach, and you just have a lot more people going there, so.
Yeah, so that's
And we
why
found that some of these gatekeepers, they're young.
kids,
students,
the kids.
And so sometimes it's a little more difficult being a gatekeeper than you think it is sometimes, so we needed some backup in there.
Right,
for some of
especially on the
it gets a
weekends.
little- yeah.
The weekends were really, really crazy when we had that hot spell. So we were getting a lot of people there, and the gate attendants, one of them had to go to the restroom, they'd leave, and so you had to have somebody else there. And it was kind of really handing out the passes and things like that, so they needed 2 people on the weekend. So that's why we did that. We figured Grinnell's was closed, so we could do that.
But it still is a revenue stream, because even in increasing, it has gotten beyond where you could just leave one student there handling this, especially on the weekends. And even for the lifeguard situation, you couldn't. So that's why you're seeing the increase. It's similar, but it is not, because it is anticipating Grinnell's to be open all season. We're hopeful, but
Nancy, I just had a quick question on the parking situation.
yes.
As far as the beach being considered open, people can still use the beach itself, they just can't park, correct?
Well, if there is heavy equipment
Yeah,
there and on that
parking lot's
thing,
closed.
that's gonna be closed.
So the lot's closed, but the beach is open per se.
Right,
Because what I'm leading into is you mentioned the parking lot across the street.
right.
And is that behind the restaurant? Is that where?
There's like a strip of land, I believe,
Yeah.
back there that the
They,
town.
I think they
would
parked there at
still
the
own by-
Tiverton Days event. How many cars can fit back there, do we know?
Oh, I don't know, but what we're anticipating is just for using it for the heavy equipment. If in fact, there's a chance that it's not so much equipment and it's feasible that cars could use part of the parking
Yeah.
lot.
I was just wondering, it's
If
probably
you
more of a
could put
policy
more-
issue than it is for us, but I was just wondering if they didn't park the heavy equipment there, maybe they could use that as the beach parking. Only issue you have there is people crossing the street.
Because that was raised on another year.
Okay.
And I believe part of the problem was we were worried about people crossing back and forth there, because that is kind of at a turn,
Yeah.
at a
Yeah,
curve.
it's not ideal.
Yeah. So, that's where that stands.
And it wouldn't be possible to open on the weekends during the construction?
Well, I don't think they're gonna haul their equipment out and back and forth. It's the idea of putting, number one, the space for the cars in
Yeah.
there, and number two, do you want people around heavy equipment like that? I mean, but in fairness, why they're still discussing on that is, I know the DPW director said they were gonna begin to put, was it sheathings in or something, anyway, but they weren't even quite sure how all that was gonna be done and what type of equipment was coming on the water side and on the, so they're working on it. The plan just isn't far enough along for us to be able to gauge.
Any other questions on the recreation, on beaches and summer recreation?
You're gonna notice that the director's recreation coordinator or director has an increase in salary. That salary was lowered from prior years, and the work now that it curtails, especially between 2 beaches and the summer programs, and it's a year-round position now. So, council felt that was really asking a lot of person, just with the gas back and forth every day. The position also helps out the Recreation Commission with a lot, and the Christmas programs and the trunk or treat programs and things like that, so it was voted on that, and they put the 2,500, those are the two you're gonna see in red because they were voted on. That's for the Christmas tree lighting programs and the trunk or treat, putting it back in.
Nancy, I think they were also going to put 2 more programs, they wanted a program each one.
Right,
So
right.
that was an increase in that as well. Because
Right.
they're very popular, the programs, so.
They are putting a plan and a program. They're also doing working on a financial plan of where they see the beaches going over the next few years. So they're really trying to work on it. It's been difficult because we haven't had a full committee for recreation, so they haven't met as often as they should. We've been needing members.
Who was it that wanted to add? When you say they, I'm just,
Recreation Committee.
okay, the committee.
And Nancy, when you talk about things that are revenue neutral, what categories are we talking about? The whole thing, or?
For the programs? Well,
Right.
because a lot of the recreation programs now, unlike years in the past, we had a summer recreation where, I don't know if it was 9 to 11 or something, or 9 to 12, where they had a nominal fee, but we paid all the staff and for the programs, and they used to take them to parks and things like that. And there was always a cost more associated with it because, but now, a lot of these programs are revenue neutral because it is someone comes, a private person comes in and says, okay, I'll do, cooking lessons for you, and we'll charge the kids $50. I don't know what the fees are, but I'm just using it, $50. And so if she gets 10 kids, that's what she is compensated for, so that it's not costing the town. A lot of those programs were implemented about 4 or 5 years ago. Susan Gill used to be the recreation coordinator, and she started to move programs into that type program where it paid for itself, more or less.
So is it fair if we're looking at, so for the summer recreation, the 29,000 is to say that the fees that we get from kids in Tiverton paying cover the 29,000, or is that correct?
No, I'm only saying the programs do. We still have to pay for the directors and counselors that the town has for some of these programs that aren't as involved. Like we still have at, I believe, Boogamash Park and Pecasset, some minor programs, but we don't have the number of kids that we used to have in that, because now a lot of them are going towards, kayak lessons up at Fogland, or, I can't remember all the programs they do, but I know there's a cooking one, and there's a kayak one, because what happened in the past is the town would pay for people to come in and say, give tennis lessons, or give swimming lessons, and you might get 2 or 3 kids that were taking swimming lessons at Grinnell's, but you're paying someone all summer to be giving the swimming lessons. Or the same thing with the tennis lessons. Now they get the tennis lessons, but you're paying whatever you're signing up is paying the exact cost of what the tennis instructor is charging.
Joe,
So we're only facilitating the paperwork and collecting the funds, and it's going to the person that is doing the activity. In
Joe-
most cases.
Joe, we had cooking and baseball, correct? Were those two?
There's a
We had
babysitting
cooking,
one.
we had cooking, we had baseball, we had kayaks, we did have babysitting. We had quite a few, and then they weren't getting enough people, they were only getting 2, and most of the vendors wanted 8 people. So if they didn't get 8, they didn't have the class. But like Nancy said, they got whatever they charged that student. If they got 10 students, we didn't pay them anything, they got that money, so that's the way it worked.
And if they had 2, we
Yeah.
didn't pay them anything. So we're not paying a lot of these instructors. We used to have gymnastics, we used to
Right.
have all this, but the town paid for the instructors. And it was a nominal fee for the children, but it's just changed.
Nancy, I want to ask in the backup for account 8830, so directors and counselors, it says it's important to, quote, it's important to put programs in place that utilize the assets, increase service profile of the town. I'm not challenging that, I'm just asking, that reads like there's some metric that somebody somewhere pays attention to, so it's important. I'm just curious if that's just a statement of general philosophy, or?
Programs, summer camp includes an appropriate amount of travel for recreation and learning activities. Doesn't really sound like backup more than a thought there, but it is. They still do have some summer camp.
I think you're on the next page. I'm
Oh,
talking.
I'm sorry.
It's directors and counselors 5181. There are 2 bullet points under it.
5181, given the town's
So just service profile sounds like there might be some metric that somebody somewhere cares about, but I'm wondering if that's the case, or if this is just general, if we have these assets, they should be used, just a general philosophy.
Well, I think this, since it came from the Recreation Commission, that must be their philosophy of doing it,
Okay.
and they probably do track. I mean, I'm sure they do track to utilize, get the best bang for the buck that they're spending out there, so I'm sure they do consider because they're tracking everything.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was some kind of,
No, I don't
State
know
grant
that
or
they
something, if you have a certain
specifically
amount of
have some
percentage or-
spreadsheet
no?
Tracking it all, I don't think so.
okay.
And Nancy, when the revenue estimates will come in a couple of weeks for us, we will see a line item for beaches, is that correct? That
Right.
would be the fees for people parking.
In fact, you'll probably see both Bogland and Grinnell's, but of course Grinnell's doesn't show.
Right.
Bogland will.
And then for the summer recreation, is there a revenue line item associated with that, do you know?
It's gonna be minimal. It's gonna be any of the small programs or any little amount beyond it. But yes, there'll be a small
Okay,
revenue on that too.
great.
Now, that won't offset the cost of the summer rec program.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I think if we could move to the next line item, which is we have two separate accounts. One is the Harbor Commission and then the Harbor Master. And those numbers are 3350, if we could take them in that order. And so the first one, Mr. Cox, who is the chair of the Harbor Commission.
You're a team.
And a team, excellent. So that's on page 9 of this new docket, right down at the bottom. And we have a lot of new members on the board, so if you could
Certainly.
introduce yourself.
My name's Bruce Cox. I'm chair of the Harbor Commission, which is an advisory commission to the town council, and works with the harbor, closely with the harbor master. We attend virtually all of our meetings. We are charged with watching over the waters, coastal waters in the harbor of the town of Tiverton. We have, we believe we're instrumental in pursuing the Stone Bridge abutment rebuild. When first we're looking at it, we're looking at a committee that hadn't met for 2 years, and we started banging the drum. And a past planner actually started finding the grant that was a federal grant. At one point, it was earmarked for this project, and at one point, DOT seemed to have it slip away. And thanks to a counselor on the commission, on the town council, and the Harbor Commission, and the former administrator, we were able to preserve those funds. So the abutment will be built. We're now in the throes of a discussion with the DOT relative to what they're going to be doing with the footings of the old Southampton River Bridge, because with the removal of the trestle, it changed the dynamics of the harbor quite a bit, and to the detriment of the harbor. But thankfully, the Stone Bridge abutment will be reinforced, finished hopefully this summer. One of the things that is in our budget is a request for funding for a water testing program that we've been doing for a number of years. We've identified point sources of pollution, one of them being a farm, and unfortunately, because of a thing called the Right to Farm Act, there's virtually nothing you can do to force the farmer to stop the pollution. You can go and try to elicit their cooperation. This particular farmer has not been cooperative. The Eastern District, forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the entity, that works with farmers actually approached the farmer, because we were able to give them demonstrative evidence of where the E. coli was jumping up in its concentrations and such. And so we've identified the source. Unfortunately, we can't cure the problem yet. If that farm changes hands, you can bet we will probably be all over that. We have identified a source, or not a source, but a problem that exists in the gut over in Nanaquacket, Stin Flesh Gut. We are working our way upstream to try to identify the source of that problem. Last year, we had to stop because we ran out of water. It was such a dry, the stream itself literally dried up. But that's an ongoing project to try to preserve, keep track of where the water quality problems exist. We had $1,800 for last year's budget. We're asking for $1,800 again this year. I think the bill came in at 14, yeah, about $1,500 this past year because some testing wasn't able to be done because you couldn't get the water. There's no flow, if you will.
It says for last year 2,400, but down to 1,800. Is
Down
that
to
right?
1,800.
Okay, so it went down.
That's correct. We think that, we're not asking for money that we don't want to use, kind of thing. We have in our request, and the town council's thumbs down on it, the idea of a capital budget of $30,000 rather, for a pump-out boat, and let me explain the rationale behind that. For those who are new to the board, the town has a thing called a harbor management plan. It's actually on your website and whatnot. It's been approved by CRMC, but it hasn't been finalized. And part of the reason it hasn't been finalized is that we have not gone for a water quality permit from DEM. The reason we have not done that is because thanks to a 1972 law called the Federal Clean Waters Act, there is an area of federal designation called SA waters. What SA stands for, I have no clue, but it's the name. It could be Bruce, it could be Tom, it doesn't matter. It's called SA waters. And those are articulated areas. They're not shown on a plan, but when you take a look at our harbor management plan, those SA waters overlay some very large areas of our current mooring fields, like the basin, like the north end. The problem with SA waters is back in 1972, when someone was drawing up the Clean Waters Act, they made a rather wild assumption. They assumed that every boat out there on a mooring has 2 people living on it, and every day, 2 people move their bowels and pump it into the water, which is ludicrous. But that's what SA waters are about, and they say, let's get moorings out of SA waters. My goal had been, when I became aware of this, to contact our senators and representatives in Congress to say, can we get a little modification here? That if this area is serviced by pump-out boats, because the state of Rhode Island is the first state in the nation to be a zero discharge state. There are some pump-out stations in the area that will service the boats. There's one at Standish Boatyard that is accessible. A couple on the other side in Portsmouth that are hard to access. But if we can get an exception to that, SA water drafted into the Clean Waters Act, that if it's a discharge-free zone, this removal of moorings in SA waters should not have to be done. I personally know both Senator Whitehouse and Mr. Cicilline because 30 years ago we used to be in front of the same judges at the same time all the time. And so we have a long ago friendship. I know Senator Reed, but that has nothing to do with my past practices, and I don't know Mr. Langevin, but nonetheless, I believe if I could get 2 people's ears, I could get 4. But they've been a little bit busy dealing with a rather exciting year.
Nation state.
And despite the fact that I've tried to reach out to them, I think they've been non-responsive because they're busy with what they probably feel are bigger and more important things. And I candidly enjoy them, join in their concerns. The $300 for the water quality permit, the harbor management plan is the plan, the designation, authorization from Coastal Resource Management Council that allows us to charge people for moorings. We are allowed to manage the bottoms of the water. The bottom of the bay and the rivers and such are owned by the state. We're just given permission to manage that, and that's through the coastal management plan. We've been sort of, as I said, delaying and going forward because I wanted to get rid of this risk. Now CRMC has said, we're gonna give you a year extension, but go get your water quality permit so we can stamp this plan, and we say this is another plan that's complete, please. So we're gonna have to do that with DEM, and I'm in the process of finding out who the person up at DEM is in charge of that now. There had been a gentleman, Joe Migliori, who'd been there for decades, and he retired last year, so now it's hunting down within the bureaucracy there who's in charge of the water quality permits and getting that application in. So that's what that $300 is about, and that's why we'd said, let's budget for a capital budget for a pump-out boat. A pump-out boat runs roughly $100,000 or so, but the state has grants for them, but you have us match 25% towards the boat. In the past, we've had town councils say, yes, you can go up for a bid for a boat. But the problem was there was no capital budget item to take care of the match. I understand we're in a financial crunch this year. The town councils are clear on Saturday, don't think about it. But you can bet we'll be back next year, especially if we are threatened with anyone suggesting that we gotta do something about SA Waters. So that's where the commission is at with its budget request. We have the 3 items. I understand that the pump-out boat is probably totally off the table, but I do believe the other 2 things are worthy endeavors that we need to continue with.
And it's understood, so that, and you had mentioned that the 30,000 would be the town's contribution and the balance.
That would
The
be for,
70,000.
if we were to go for, last year we didn't bother, because we knew we didn't have any kind of funding in the town's budget. It hadn't been placed in their capital budget item. We didn't bother, but the state every year says we have these funds. And indeed, reviewing the grants that were given last year by the state, some of them were grants to help towns maintain their boats, which is nice to see, versus simply saying, okay, you have boats, now your problem. They're now using the grant to help maintain them, which is good. Probably 6 years ago, we approached the town council about a mooring fee increase. And mooring fees were increased enough to have a purchase and operation of a pump-out boat be a zero-sum game, so that there was no added cost to the town out of its general funds for operating a pump-out boat. It was all the burden was put on the mooring holders. Unfortunately, that town council took that $16 per mooring, said thank you very much, it went into the general fund, and no, you don't get a pump-out boat. So you can imagine there's no overwhelming appetite on the part of the commission's part to say, let's do another fee increase and hope we get another pump-out boat, because it's not fair. So it's,
So all the mooring fees just go into the general fund?
that's correct.
Yes.
All the mooring fees go into the general fund. We bring in round figure about $60,000 roughly, against a budget of slightly less than 25. Now it's going 27.
25 last year is.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm missing something. You're saying we need the pump-out boat because SA Waters requires it, and?
No, it's a Venn diagram, if you will, of bureaucratic overlay. SA Waters is a federal designation. It's not a state designation, but it's incorporated within any coastal resource management plan. The way the various regulations work, obviously, federal overlay is the massive overlay on all waters that are navigable in the country. Then within the state of Rhode Island, you have two governmental bodies that are incorporated in management. CRMC, which is management of the water type, how it's used, the regulations applied within it, and then DEM, which is the entity that controls the quality of the water, such as your what are they called now? UDITs, on-site wastewater treatment systems, so that what is the quality of the water. So that's why there's a crossing over there between CRMC, which is the management of the utilization, and DEM, which is the monitoring of the quality. That's where there's an overlay. So there's 3 governmental entities in that regard.
So where does the pump-out boat come in?
The pump-out boat comes in the attempt to offset or justify why we can keep moorings in SA-type waters, or actually anywhere. is a zero discharge state. Anyone is supposed to be able to have their holding tank, everyone's supposed to have a holding tank in their boat for human waste. And many communities have a pump-out boat system, such as Bristol, Warren, Wickford, Block Island, all, have these boats so that they can go to a boat, and if someone needs it pumped out, you're only allowed to charge $5, state law, to pump out 30 gallons, maximum of 30 gallons, for each 30 gallons. But the objective was that there is no pump-out boat servicing this area. To get one and have that as an offset against the SA water. And my objective had been to try to get the federal law changed. It's a simple exception clause that has to be put in there. I've drafted it, I've got it sitting there, I'm banging on the drum, but it's sort of going nowhere at this point.
So what's the risk without a boat?
Well, even with the boat right now, I can't tell you that there's no risk. But the risk with the full harbor management plan is someone says, okay, these are SA waters, you're not supposed to have any moorings in there, start a plan of removing them. And that does two things. A, it stops the income stream, and B, it deprives the citizens of Tiverton of the pleasures of the water.
So having the pump-out boat theoretically would be one more thing if somebody came looking to shut down the moorings
You
to
could
say,
say
we've got a pump-out boat. Maybe they'll say, okay, in that case, we won't come after you.
Exactly.
And currently, the only pump-out station is at Standish?
The only active and readily available one is at Standish. There's one over at Pirate Cove, and there's one at Brewers, but those are
But for our town moorings.
That's correct.
It's a private institution that's
That is
running it.
correct.
Instead of, there's no way for our town to protect our own waters because we don't have a pump-out boat. We have to
That's
rely
correct.
on
We
a
don't have a
private
pump-out
citizen
site set up
to
or
do.
anything else. That's
Okay.
correct. I mean, town of Bristol installed, and Bristol has the advantage of having a sewer system, but Bristol installed a pump-out dock on their own marina. Bristol's been very
That's
aggressive about
interesting.
protecting or utilizing their waterfront in the course of development. They actually have their own little marina and everything else. But
Has anyone thought about, with the sewage system coming down, connecting to Fall River down by Riverside
Mhm.
Drive, of creating a pump-out station?
Well,
that's similar?
one of the exercises the commission is undergoing right now is the analyzing what's going on down under the Secundit River Bridge, where there's a ramp and there's parking. The state offered that to us when it first built it, and the whole administration was like, no. At that time, the administrators' comment to me was, I know water is wet, beyond that, I don't care about it. Which really wasn't exactly a whole lot of foresight. It wasn't met. And so what we're looking at is other communities have parking assessments and access assessments for waterfronts. Mattapoisett, for instance, they have a parking meter just like you have in Providence, where you go, you get a little slip, you put it on your dashboard, and you park for a period of time. And we're trying to do an analysis of, okay, how many parking spaces do we have? How long will people be there? How they access the ramp, and to offset the cost of obviously a summertime employee being there to monitor it, and in the wintertime, even non-summertime, but something can be monitored by the police, for instance, if we have authority and control over it. And if people violate it, they can get, ticketed. And we're looking at the analysis of what would the cost be, could we generate as an income stream. And there are rules, and if you're not familiar with some of the towns, for instance, like Providence or East Providence, you're not allowed to charge more taxes to someone who's not a citizen of the community because they're not a citizen. So you set your tax level here. But if you happen to live in East Providence, you say, I'm a resident of East Providence, and you get a citizen's discount here. So we're looking at that as a structure so that we would say, hey, here are the fees. And there was a great email from the harbor master to the past administrator this summer expressing his frustrations of the failure to manage that dock, that whole waterfront down there by the state, because it's, people from Tiverton go to Fall River because they can access that ramp better than this one here because of lack of control and no one monitoring it. So we're in the process of saying, okay, here we have that building that's down there that soon will probably be offered to the former owner of it who doesn't have any interest in it, and then who wants it. And what better asset if you have the stone bridge abutment reinforced, and if you can move towards that end of the basin, now the town can make the basin a real asset. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up in Barrington on the water. The Barrington Yacht Club used to come over here with 10, 20 boats and go to the Stone Bridge Inn and go other places. It's an economic builder, if you will. So we're looking at, okay, how do we make the analysis and then the pitch to the town and say, look, it's either a problem that you're gonna have, that you're gonna have to ignore, it's gonna be an eyesore.
Or make it a money
Or
source.
make it a money resource and asset to the town, exactly. But those are projects that are in the work, but that's what we're looking at.
So if there were to be a pump-out boat, it sounds like something that you'd need somebody to operate it. So the boat owners would call and say, I need to be pumped out. Somebody would have to take the boat to there, pick the
Right,
stuff up.
The boat usually, most of them operate on a on-call basis on a 1 or 2 days of the weekend, in
Mhm.
particular during highest weekends. The classic is Memorial Day and 4th of July. This young man will tell you that don't, it's crazy.
Mhm.
Lots of people, and he works at Maritime Solutions, and it's crazy time. It's when everyone wants to be on the water. And then what is very successful is you can do remote pump outs. So you call the harbor master or an entity that's in charge of the pump out boat, and they go out at their own time to a boat that might be on a mooring and pump out the boat.
Okay, and so that would have to be additional operating expenses?
That's exactly right. And as I said, a half a dozen years ago, we made a proposal to a town council hoping that we would suggest this if you do the pump out boat. They said, okay, we're gonna do that, but we're not gonna give you a pump out boat. And, that caused us some consternation with the public coming to us and saying, why did you do that? And we said, because we didn't say take the money and run, we said take the money and give something back. And the whole idea, Portsmouth doesn't charge for their moorings, other than a registration fee of $5 to $10, which is what costs them to monitor the moorings. They use a service. Our fees are now on a gradated level, inexpensive for small boats. Some guy has a 13-foot Boston whaler, he's gonna pay, was it $25?
$5.
Yeah, and then it scales as a boat gets larger and it needs more area around it, it's taking more of the area, you charge more. I have a 36-foot sailboat. I now have gone from paying $40 to slightly more than $100. But for me, that's still a bargain, because over in Bristol, where I'm a non-resident, I still want a mooring, I'm paying $360.
And that's an annual fee?
It's an annual fee.
So do you have an estimate of the operating cost for the pump-out boat?
Not off the top of my head at this point in time. That was number one, let's get the budget item proposed out there. We can certainly come back to this group with what we had in the past. We have to dig it out of some archives a bit, but it's probably in somebody's computer.
Well, I was mainly curious, but also because you did, in your request, ask for the boat, so I didn't know if there
We
was
asked for
operating costs already in the
We
budget.
asked for a capital line item so that we could petition for the boat, and then we'd be able to come to the council and say, we have a capital line item here, here's what the boat will cost to operate, here's how we pay for it.
Okay.
And we'd do that with some trepidation because we've been burned before, but
Mhm.
at least this time we'd have, the backing of a capital line item.
Okay, gotcha.
How many moorings do we have?
394, I believe.
And how many would be affected by this SA fiasco?
A third of them. Round number, it's just that knowing what the overlay looks like.
Yeah, it's good.
So I don't want to risk any of them. I'm of the opinion we're not over mooringed in Tiverton. I think we could do of more efficient layouts in certain areas and whatnot. The problem is the harbor management plan has limited numbers in certain areas, which we are exceeding. And when a mooring leaves there, we're supposed to say, okay, a mooring does not go back in that place.
Yeah. Are all the moorings used every summer? Is there a waiting list, or?
There is a waiting list. They're not all used every summer, no.
How many years on the waiting list?
Depends on the area.
All right,
In the basin is the most popular, highest demand area, and that's
Peter Core's the top one. He's been on there a while.
a decade.
Yeah.
okay, that's about normal. I did a stint on Harbor Patrol in Barrington years ago, and we had a 20-year waiting list at that time. But that being said as well, some people might not like this, but you said you pay 3 and change for your size boat in Bristol,
For my mooring,
and every other harbor in the state is probably about that or more. Have we considered going up at all with our fees?
No. We have no services to offer in Tiverton.
Yeah,
You can come here, but you can't get on land.
okay. That's correct, no launch.
Yeah.
No launch,
Yeah,
there's
there's
no
no launch.
launch, there's no dinghy dock. I mean,
Gotcha.
when we have the stone bridge abutment built, I mean, there's some people who are upset that the face of it's gonna be flat, it's gonna be vertical. And there were those of us who cheered when we saw that, because that just invites the idea of now we have some pilings there. We have some a dock system that used to be installed there. If we can put that system back in, that will service the harbor master's boat and the fire department's boat, and save the dock rental fees that are associated with those operating expenses. And, oh, by the way, maybe now tangent up along the face of there to have a dinghy dock, so people can come ashore. We did manage to acquire the floats that were down next to the DOT building down by, underneath the bridge, and those are now up at our department, DPW, so those are be utilizable for other projects we envision.
Okay. The only other question I had, he touched on as far as how many moorings we have and how many would be affected, so we got that answer.
I have one question, Bruce, is going back to some of the earlier stuff. As the currents have changed through the basin, will we need to dredge? And is that a town
The
responsibility?
interesting thing is, the answer is yes and no. Some areas are getting deeper because they're being scored, but other areas, silt is filling in, and that's a problem. Our objective is making a proposal that we add on to the ends of the old trestle abutments, taking the old Secundit River Bridge base abutment, or the bases that are gonna be left there when the steel's gone. And that's the next project, if you will. Transfer the rocks from here, put them there, and bring a pinch back at that point in the river to force water out through underneath the Mount Hope Bridge like it used to. An analysis was done. We're very fortunate. We have some people, the harbor masters, Dave Fanyer and Tyler here, had done readings of what was the boat velocity at the bridge to stand still at max ebb. And before the trestles were removed, the boat velocity was 2 miles an hour, 2 knots. Now it's 4 knots. And so then we said, all right, what has changed here? And it's removal of the trestles and the dredging that was done, and removal of the ends of the railroad bridge abutments, all of which allows more water in there at Mount Hope Bay to come out through the basin, as opposed to going out underneath the Mount Hope Bridge. We wrote to the DOT about this, to suggest that maybe they might consider, and they came back with a rather dismissive letter, citing a physics law that doesn't apply, because the law assumes only one aperture, namely the Secundit River, when in fact there are two, and the letter laid it out very clearly. We have on our commission Charles Lawrence, PhD in mathematics at Brown University, And it was interesting to watch his reaction when he saw that. He said, that's just dead wrong. And we're gonna be going back to the DOT with a rebuttal to say, no, let's look at this again. And yeah, we know there are environmental issues, and we know there's engineering, but we're gonna have a problem here. Our question is just, all right, how long are we gonna bang on the drum? And the answer is until the stones are gone, I guess.
Hopefully not, right. Great. Can we, if we could, we can move on to the harbor master account on the top of page 10. Tyler is your first one, right?
Tyler Loomis.
I don't know whether you'll be presenting or Bruce or.
No.
I'll present it.
Great.
Tyler's very good at it.
Thank you.
So I have pretty much the same thing as the years before. The pay, I've left the same. Assistant, he's being utilized very well. I have him helping me on the weekends, being utilized as much as I can. Uniforms and clothing, t-shirts and hats, sweatshirts, being on the boat. Communications, it's VHFs, handheld VHFs, radios, all that equipment that's required on the boat. Keep it up and running. Nothing for that one. Office supplies, that's just the regular phone updates, printers and envelopes to mail out to all the mooring renewals. Kind of required. Boat operations, that's the only one that's changed. I've added a $2,000 increase for unexpected repairs. As the boat is aging, it is gonna break down. We are gonna have failures. I mean, this year we had some serious issues with it. I have it repaired. It's gonna keep happening, and if we keep on top of it, it'll save us the $40,000 in the long run, getting new motors. But it is gonna be time for new motors eventually.
Tyler, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Thank you. On this proposal that we got, it does show that the, like you said, the salary would remain the same. On the updated information we're getting, it is up 1,000, and you might not want to short yourself,
Sorry.
so,
If he was not, if he was gonna remain typical.
unless you
Tyler,
didn't know that, but,
No, yeah, that was a Saturday meeting.
That was a surprise. And Tyler's worked for half a dozen years with no pay increase.
I'm sure you more than deserve $1,000. I just want to make sure, so that
Yeah.
6250, that's approved by the town council.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
And the 2,000 is, but as opposed to putting it in operations, we put it in with supplies expenses and added the word "and boat repairs" because we wanted to keep it separate from the actual operation cost, so we could track it better.
Where'd you say that went?
It's in, the last line is supplies, expenses,
Oh, I see.
and boat repairs.
I see.
That's where we put
Oh,
the
okay, that's where the
2,000.
two,
Okay,
okay.
it's just to keep it out of operations.
Yeah.
Because it specifically is for repairs. Oh, yeah, it's not red.
Well,
Bottom line is, we voted bottom line.
Should probably be more for Nancy. Just wondering the rationale, I mean, the salary increase is about 20%.
Right, it's because it's a low salary, was kind of almost like a stipend for him doing it. He puts, it was shown that he puts in way beyond the hours that was actually expected to be, so
So he's been volunteering your time?
he puts endless time in for that, yes.
Thank
And
you.
he's really, they
And,
thought he's done a good job.
It's appropriate to bring it up.
I mean, when you're working with a low kind of salary like that, it's difficult to just say 2% and we'll give you.
Any other questions?
I just have some follow around boat operations. What's the dock rental? We don't know the dock credit?
Absolutely not. It stays at Standish Boatyard. We rent dock space from them. Tiverton Fire also rents a space from them too.
Which is that?
Yeah.
36.
Well, yeah, it includes bottom paint and hull maintenance on that one for the 36, but I believe it's right around 35 or so.
Yeah.
Great. If there's any other questions, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good night.
Tyler, thanks for all your work. Thank you.
Okay. Tiverton Public Library. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Okay, so for the committee members, we're on the last page, the page 13, and it's a single light item, and it looks to request, at least from the town, of 565,000. So
Yes, and that represents level funding from last year. So the board met last Thursday night and had a lengthy discussion and decided, largely based on two reasons, to request the level funding. One is the unusual circumstances that the town finds itself in this year in terms of the bond debt coming online, among other issues. And the second was that we are in the middle of a long-range planning process, the first since we've moved into the new building. And so we felt that we needed to complete that in order to come back with the strongest justification for any increase. And that justification would be that it was based on what Tiverton residents have told us they want in their library.
So it was the board's feeling that the level funding for this year gets through the year, and then as a long-range plan is put in place, then there'll be a new budget request in the
Yes,
in
we
the coming year.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to make it through the year. We don't quite know how we're going to do it because we do have the same increases in electricity costs and health insurance costs that the rest of the town is facing. But we're going to do what we have to make it through. And as I said, next year, we certainly do anticipate asking for the increase with the justification from the residents themselves.
Have the number of, has the number of staff at the library decreased?
I joined in August, so since August, I know there have been positions in flux. The library was without a technology librarian for a while. A technology librarian has been hired, but a reference librarian is now half-time, who used to be full-time, and a circulation position is no longer being filled because those duties were parceled out to other staff members. So the staff positions have been in flux.
So in order to accommodate a budget, because last year there was more requested and the library was level funded, or I guess an additional 15,000 was granted or applied, but it didn't come near the 640 that was requested then.
Right, and so the hours have not been restored to what they were. I mean, Union is down to 1 day, and the library, the main library doesn't open on Tuesday mornings anymore. Whether
so
we
we're
can get through
taking-
the summer without closing on Saturdays, we won't really know for the next couple months. The state sets minimum hours of operation for us to qualify for our state grant. So we don't want to do anything to endanger that. But the state does allow fewer hours during the summer by eliminating Saturday hours. So that's sort of an exception, and the library did have to take advantage of that exception last summer, and we're going to have to at least consider it as a cost-saving measure this summer.
Okay. So our brand-new library that has been used more than double than our previous library, we're having to cut hours even though the town wants to use it more because we're not funding it adequately.
Well, that's why I hope that next year, when we finish our long-range planning process, and we've heard from the residents that the town council and the budget committee will give great weight to that residents are saying they want their Saturday hours, they want their Tuesday hours, they want, in fact, or from the survey results, they want Sunday hours. But we'll come back with the,
That makes
you know,
sense
price
when
tag
everyone's
on those
working Monday
hours
through
and
Friday.
hopefully get a positive response next year.
Well, as you're probably aware, last year was very, let's just say, acrimonious.
Yes.
But I asked some questions last year. I never did get a good answer. I don't know if you can answer it. I have discovered that if I'm an out-of-state resident, I can get a library card for $25.
So my understanding is that $25 fee allows you to check out books at the Tiverton Public Library only. You do not have the option of borrowing books through our interlibrary loan system, which gives you access to all of the public libraries in Rhode Island. So you and I, as residents, have that option.
Okay, well, so you don't get all the benefits that a state resident would get.
Right.
Has any thought been given to increasing the fee to out-of-state residents?
We have not had that discussion. I'm not sure, since I joined the board, I'm not sure if that fee is not set by OLIS, the Office of Library and Information
Not
Services.
that I can discover it isn't.
Okay.
See, what my issue with the whole thing is, I don't know what the average value of a house is in Tiverton, but let's just say 200,000. Means a library card costs me about $100. Now granted, I get the whole state, but an out-of-state, a Fall River resident can come here, use our library, which has been referred to as the crown jewel of Rhode Island's libraries, and pretty much get the same benefits I do, for a lot less. So that kind of annoys me.
Not if they can only
Well,
check
yeah,
out
but they
books
are using our
at-
building, they are using,
Yeah.
they are coming to, let me finish, Jennifer,
Okay.
they're coming to our library, utilizing our library, which generates costs, employees, you know, whatever it is. Regardless of their access to the rest of the state or not, it still impacts us. In my opinion, we should be charging them more because they are coming. I'll tell you quite frankly, this summer I did a little exercise. I went to the library at all different times of the day. Typically, say I'm wrong if you want, typically, 50% of the cars in that parking lot were out of state. Now, you can say there's a lot of Tiverton residents that have mass license plates on their cars, but that's not like it used to be. It used to be terrible, it's nowhere near as bad. They can use our conference room, you charge for the conference, birthday parties or whatever, right?
The meeting rooms,
We get a $50 rental fee for an organization.
Mostly they're used by the library, by town boards, or by nonprofits. But there is a fee, yes, if you,
And your library card is your ticket to that fee.
I don't know if a non-resident could reserve the meeting room for
I'll
a
give you another
private
example.
use.
I can't tell you the date because I have it written down at home. I went in there. The meeting room on the left, just as you go into the front doors, was packed. It was definitely a birthday party. So then I went out and walked the parking lot. Everybody in that room was from Mass.
Well,
So,
it would.
another exercise I did was, a couple of these times, I picked a person when they came out and watched them go to their car. I said, let's see where they go. Invariably, a Massachusetts license plate went left at the light to Fall River or straight to Westport. They weren't going back into Tiverton.
Okay.
I
Well,
just think we should, I think we should be charging non-residents more than we are. That would increase your revenue stream.
we could certainly look into that. I'm not sure how much, if it would be more than a few $1,000s. I will say you can't charge members of the public to walk through a public library. I go to cities all across the country. I always walk into public libraries. I sit and read their newspapers, I sit and read their magazines, and nobody has ever charged me a fee. Checking out books, participating in programs, that's something different in my mind. But I will take that idea back and we'll crunch some numbers because we will be looking for additional revenue streams. But as I said, the state has set that $100 fee to have access to all of the, to borrow books from, or materials from all of the state libraries. So if we went up to $50 for Tiverton alone, I'll go back and find out how many residents pay, how many, non-Rhode Island residents pay the $25 and how much more we bring in by making that $50.
One of the things too to just keep in mind, there were some very large, generous donors that were from Massachusetts that donated funds to build the Tiverton Library. I know a couple of them personally, and they were some of the larger donations, bigger than most of the Tiverton residents. So just in terms of, we've had some good out-of-state neighbors that have helped us.
I'd like to recognize Mrs. Black. Did you have a?
Yes, just two things. My daughter lives in Westport and she homeschools her children. So for Christmas, I signed her up so she could have access to all the books. It was $125, I think. So if you do come from out of town and you want to have total access. And then one morning, it was her son's birthday. We were going to the Boston Children's Museum. And I said, I'll go get a pass at the library. It was Tuesday morning. I didn't know it was closed. I pulled in and I said, what's going on? It's not open. So I said, what are we going to do? She said, well, I have a library card in Fall River. So I said, okay, let's go up there. So we went up there and we parked and I looked above the door and it says the People's University. We're talking about Fall River, Massachusetts, that everyone makes fun of. And I asked them their hours. They said 9 to 9. They value what the library does as we do. So, and then when we went around door to door, and people were concerned, of course they were, with their taxes, and when we showed them the 50% from the state, the foundation money, the citizens paid 2.9. So I would say to someone, I was actually holding up a sign on Main Road for the library, and the man went by and he yelled at me, he said, why don't you get out of town, you're always looking for money. So I said, okay, and I just said thank you. And then we went door to door, and I happened to knock on his door in Nantucket, and he opened the door and he said, oh, it's you. I said, yeah, it's me. When we explained to him that was, I said, would you pass that up? So that's just the overview of that amazing building, as you called. People go in there and they can't believe it. But you do have to pay, if you're from Westport or Fall River, that fee to have access, okay, that $125. Thank you.
Other questions for Mrs. Herman?
One of them, actually, I lost my train of thought because I was listening to that wonderful speech. As far as the revenue, does the library hold any classes other than, I know they just held something out of Newport that was free to the public, which, that's fantastic. Do they offer any pay classes? $5 for a lecture or $10 for a lecture, stuff like that?
So the evening, the programs, we don't charge a fee for. Our new technology librarian offers classes in computer skills. There is no charge
No
for
charge.
that.
Okay.
And is that for residents or not? Is there a resident or a non-resident aspect if you're signing up for a class? So like, I know they had the, keep reading or something like that. That class filled. Do you have preference if you from another town, maybe not? Because I know like, you don't have to get a library card if you're from another state. You can still go in and use the facility as long as you only have to pay for your entrance.
Right. The only programming that I'm aware of in terms of signups and priorities is for the children's. And then I know that residents get priority. In terms of the evening programming, I think usually they just, I have seen that they ask you to reserve or let them know that you're coming because there are space constraints. But whether I am not aware that they've ever stopped people from walking in by asking for identification.
Hi, Carol. So I'm a rookie here, so I'd just like to ask a couple questions because I don't know the answer. So I'm looking at what was budgeted last year, and I know everything's level funding, but I just want to understand, I'm looking inside the book here, just in the increases, and I see that under the salaries.
So what
Sorry.
sheet are you looking for? Because
I don't know if you have the sheet, and I can give it to you so you can see. It's this backup sheet
Because I don't know that I've ever seen that.
here. You can take that back and just look at it. I wrote everything down. So towards the bottom, you'll see the budgeted 18 and then the 19. I'm talking about the salaries and the health insurance and the FICA. Can you see that part? It's towards the bottom a little bit.
Yes.
So, like for instance, I think it says last year for health insurance, it was 70,000, and then for next year budget, it would be 95,000.
Yeah, I don't know what the
Okay.
our director did not provide us with a justification for that.
Okay.
And, we did get this last week, but we didn't go through it because the bottom line was just
Right.
beyond
Sure.
reason.
I was
And-
just trying to understand how you were gonna make that work if you're level funding. And those seem like exorbitant costs that are going up between the salaries and the benefits. I didn't know if it's just because there's more people and it costs more to employ more people.
I don't know where the director got those numbers. And I know board members did have questions. We found this was inadequate for our purposes. It's not something that we felt was in the form to present to the budget committee. And that's when we had our discussion and said, given the circumstances, we're just going to ask for level funding.
I appreciate it. It's just because I'm curious how that, why it would happen.
I don't know where they came from, quite frankly.
So we're in the same
But
boat.
I do think that they raise a lot of questions.
Okay. Thank you for answering.
Any other questions?
I just wanted, earlier, it sounded like you were suggesting that the only day that you're allowed to reduce hours during the summer is Saturday.
Yes.
That's the only, you're restricted to that day that you can reduce hours?
Yeah, the state tells you have to, I believe it's for a town our size, we have to be open 50 hours a week. But not during the summer, because if you close on Saturdays. So, that is the only exemption, and that's why the library closed on Saturdays last summer, because the state allows us to do that, to not make the minimum hours that are otherwise required.
Do you know where that restriction is documented?
I can find it for you and send it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, because, I mean, on Olis's website, they just have a total number of hours per week that, and we looked into this last year, and I don't recall anybody coming across a Saturday-only exemption. So if that's written down, I'd be interested
Yeah,
to see that.
but you did find that for a town of our size, we have to be open 50 hours a week,
Right.
right, which is what we're open now. So we're at the minimum.
Right, but I'm just not seeing, we haven't come across language that said it had to be Saturday that would be reduced hours, so I'd be interested to see that.
Okay.
And not just, more to mention for Mr. Edwards, if you look on Olis's website, they do break down all of the library systems in Rhode Island by their type of revenue, and our library's other revenue, which would presumably include the out-of-state, is 4% of the total revenue is other revenue, and that's very low comparative to a lot of the other
What's
cities
the
and
actual
towns.
number besides 4%?
It is $29,627.
So part of that is towns, as I understand, other public libraries have endowments like we used to have. And we have a library foundation, which is a separate 501c3 that is trying to be a source of supplemental revenue by building up funds that they could then provide the library with the interest from. But, you know, if they take in $10,000 a year and they give us $10,000 a year, you're never getting to that point.
Right.
But the Library Foundation is absolutely working on that to provide an additional revenue stream to the library.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. McNally, I just had a comment to add to it, to echo Jen. The place is fantastic. We use it often. I have a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old. I see a mix of in-state plates and out-of-state plates. Honestly, I don't know when you go, but I see a lot of in-state plates, Rhode Island plates. The other thing to keep in mind too is, it's also, excuse me, it's also a draw to the town. So if those people leave there and they go to Dunkin' Donuts to spend $10, we're getting 1% of that back to the town. They go down the street, they go to a restaurant to have something to eat, we're getting 1% of that back to the town, all the prepared meals tax. So I know it's not a gold mine, but it's still drawing people into the town, so.
Yeah.
I'd like to make one comment as well. And if you would take this back, Carol, as well. I know that a couple years ago, I had some frustration in signing up my kids for like story time, but they changed it where they let the Tiverton residents do it first, so I wanted to say thank you to the board for that. My kids really enjoy doing that, so if you could take that back.
I will.
I know, I'm just one person, but I know we appreciate that. We feel like the town is getting something a little extra.
That change was made in response to requests from residents.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to, we certainly still have some more agenda items, but I don't know if there's anyone in the audience that had some public comments that they'd like to do now instead of holding off to the end. All right, so one thing that I think we've gotten a little behind upon is trying to plan site visits. And I have the benefit of 1 year of experience, so I'll tell you exactly what we did last year. Perhaps other years there was more done or less done. But we saw many of the larger department areas in terms of dollar requests, and in particular had facilities and as well as capital requests, I think was part of the big reason. So we already did a site visit for the Department of Public Works, but last year we had a visit to the police station. We went to multiple fire stations. We went to 3 of them. We saw multiple schools. I think we split it up over multiple days. We did go to the library and we went to the senior center. So what I'd like to ask is, I'm concerned this time schedule in terms of what we have. There's really not a lot of time. We had been doing those over weekends on Saturday mornings. There's probably the likelihood that we could double up a couple if we did it. But I'd like to get input from the committee about, would you like to see all of them? And if so, then we can get going on scheduling them. But if it's not all of them, then which ones do you see as priorities?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a comment and a question. The first question would be, let's use the library, for example. They're requesting a level funding. Do we need to go there because they're really not requesting much more? Or is that something that we just do? Again, being new, I don't know what the answer is to that question.
They maintain themselves though, too.
I'm sorry?
I was thinking they maintain themselves through their own, we allocate that fund and
And with level funding, there's maintenance, they're not asking for anything.
I just didn't know if they're not asking for anything more. Do we need to take our time to go there to look at things when they're just saying, listen, we don't want any more than we had before? I'm just thinking about shortening the time on the weekends.
Is the library interested in having the budget committee come? Just like,
What would you usually look at?
I think the opportunities that we've had, again, 1 year for me in terms of the experience, but it was pretty much for all of them. It was an opportunity for the department head. Last year when we went to the library, Greg Jones showed us around, and there was library staff to give a sense of what the physical plant was about, what the programs that were going on. Much of it was a fair amount of in-depth discussions about many of the things that were presented to the committee during one of our regular scheduled meetings. So I think it was I think what the people last year, and I'll speak to this year, is a thought of really important for us to at least see the physical plants of these town assets and buildings. So but it's not something that we need to do busy work if people don't feel it's helpful. But to answer your question, it was mainly to see the library, to understand some of the programmatic activities that were going on was the purpose of the visit. I think it was probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours that we spent on a Saturday morning.
I think generally the idea is, I mean, people could run for the budget committee and for whatever reason haven't interacted with a particular building or department. And so it's usually I've found just an information gathering. I mean, if you have questions about a budget, sometimes it occurs to you to ask it while looking around the building or something like that. Most of us were here last year on this side of the table, and if you guys might have a lot of familiarity with the schools or the libraries, in which case you don't necessarily, whereas somebody who came later in life and never had kids in the schools might want to go to the schools because they've never been there, and so it's one thing to look at a number on a spreadsheet, it's another to say, okay, here is my $30 million.
it was helpful to see the state of the heating system. Like, I'd been in the high school many times, and I had no idea what a mess it was. Like, it was frightening.
And similar, if you haven't, I have a child in elementary and middle school, so I haven't been in high school, so, yeah, I would like to, there's certain definitely ones that, and there's certain municipal buildings I've never been in. I've never been in the fire stations, or I have no reason to be in the
I
station.
found going to all the fire stations really informative. To really understand how the firemen work on their time off, what they're doing to take care of the building themselves.
Well, even when we went to DPW, it was kind of eye-opening to see some of the conditions of the building and to see, so I definitely think there are places that I would like to go if everyone's open to that.
Well, this year too, we're probably about, halfway through the bond repairs?
See it.
Yeah.
So we could
Yeah.
see that, because I was really, I knew the high school was bad, but I was terrified when I went into that boiler room. And that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
But it looks the same, the boiler room looks the same,
Is
but the
that-
roof is.
It probably
the roof
will, but
looks
the rest of
different.
it.
Yeah.
It's not leaking on the
So I'll be
boiler.
horrified.
So do we get a
again.
field trip on the roof? And what does the insurance
There
say
will be a
that
field
we
trip on
have?
the roof.
You know, it's eye-opening, have some of the kids walking around and talk about their
Being
day and how they
rained on.
interact with it and see.
Well, I don't think we saw any kids.
No, not on
We did,
Saturday.
yeah, we did everything
I got
on,
one out there.
on the weekends.
There's definitely interior work being done at the high school and the middle school right now, so you will be
Yeah.
able to see areas that are finished with ductwork, new ceiling tiles, and the energy efficient lights, just like these lights.
Well, they're doing that at night, right?
Yes, they're doing
And
it at night
weekends.
and on breaks. They just started the major offices, the main office and the guidance wing, over this little fake break, as my kid calls it, the 5 days that they had off. The boilers are not scheduled to be pulled out until they come offline, which will be about April of this year. I know they did just find some asbestos in the high school boiler room, I think, which we expected. And that's being abated. I'm sure they'll do that maybe over April break, they'll abate that. But you won't see new boilers yet.
Oh, I didn't think we would, but they're moving right along. It looks like they're making pretty good
We're
progress.
actually a little ahead of schedule.
Kelly, the kids won't be there for the abatement, for any of the
No,
abatement.
no,
correct?
no, no,
Yep.
no. They do everything at night. They do a 3 to 11 shift.
Great.
And then on, night, they do work on Saturdays, and then they also do it on.
All right. So one of the things that, what I'd propose is I think that if the fire department, and we went to multiple sites, it's probably gonna be one morning, that will take a couple of hours. The schools, if we hit a couple, or all of them, is going to take either a full morning and some, but perhaps we could do the police department and the senior center together on one day and combine it. So one thing too is if I have my calculations right in terms of where we stand in terms of the process, it will be the 17th of March, is that correct, Nancy?
Yes, I'm sorry to get back to you.
That's okay. That the town administrator owes to us the approved town council budget and the revenue. So I think we could see facilities afterwards, but obviously it's going to be, at least from the town council's perspective and the administrator, they're saying here's what they've deliberated and what they've approved. But it can be informative to us, and obviously we're independent, so we can come up with a budget more or less than any of those. But part of it is trying to get them in time so that it can influence how we look at the town council's request and then how different hours may be. So with that, then for update on the sites, and Mike, you had volunteered before, if you're still volunteering, then we can take this offline. Key is we can't do Saturday because we're outside the 48 hours of the notice period. So it'll have to be the weekend after, so,
Unless they go home tonight and put it in by 11, we could do.
well, we have to get each one of them, so
I'm not going at 11.
unless you're really good, you can get, great.
So do we want to commit that the following Saturday we start to make sure that every Saturday we fill these up?
Yes, please.
So,
I don't know if I can ask this too, but there's two particular ones I'd really like to go to. I'd really like to go to the high school, and I'd really like to go to I haven't been to fire stations or police stations, but, the weekend of the 17th, I can't get out of work. Is there any way to kinda,
We're
not just
also-
for me, but
Yeah.
that's a St. Patty's Day
That-
in Newport, and I can't get out of work that day.
I think it would be good to not do that day.
That day, yeah.
I was just gonna say the 17th, we have to go up to the state for a big meeting with the state. We can't be there either.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
so next Saturday would be the 3rd. So do we have a priority on what we want to see first?
Probably whoever's available to them first.
Yeah.
So do I make the calls myself, Mrs. Mello, or?
I can just send them an email. We have a meeting on the 3rd here too. I just want to make sure we don't have any of the building departments that you're gonna, because I don't think the fire, we're done with the fire and police, so I think they're okay. And we don't obviously need to state.
So my calculation is at 1, 2, 3, that we would have three mornings.
Could we do 10, 24, and 31?
How about the 3rd?
Fourth.
No? I think Brennan's point was we want to try to get in as many before the 17th.
Correct.
I wouldn't want to skip 2 weeks in a row.
Mhm.
And we all understand that not everyone can make it. I mean, it's just a fact of life, but.
Are, so, half of us have gone to all these places, so it, maybe what we could do is try to schedule what you are least interested in seeing on the day that you can't go.
Yeah, the third would be the third and the 17th are 2 days that I can't.
So how
But
about if,
again, I'm only one person on an 11-person board.
what if we targeted the schools on the 10th?
Okay.
That would be perfect.
And when we say target the schools, do we want to narrow that down to the high school, the middle school? I mean, they're close together. Do we need to see both? Do we want to see both?
Well, and too, like, that's, if they all sat last year, like, why would we go to Picasso? We're all, you know, we've been in
Is there
So
any
that
need
would
from
be-
the
if
people
there's- If
that,
there's no one else that has an interest to go back there.
do we need to see the elementary schools for the people that are already here? I mean, if you don't, I mean, we're in Picasso all the time. We don't need to go there.
It certainly would be the 2 older buildings.
Yeah, I would
ones
be
that-
interested in
Yeah,
middle
I-
school and high school.
That's where all the action is right now.
Okay.
So should we try to tentatively set aside the high school and the middle school for the March 10th?
Correct.
That would be
Mhm.
great.
And what do we do, 9?
Mr. Rarick.
What's that? And I could just email Mr. Rarick
Mhm.
Thank you,
and then get some times and come back.
thank you.
Okay.
Great.
I got a question. What schools, Sally, are they having problems? The high school? How about the Ranger School? They got any problems over there? No?
The wall they talk about,
Those are what's really like, the ones that got
Was-
problems.
Is there a leak?
Uh, There's a wall that, don't mind my technical term, bows apparently, in different weather. It's in the conference room and the principal's office, in the main office suite. They have done some repairs to it, and unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure if it's 100% at this point. They have done repairs to it. And it was something to do with the fact that the initial contractor went out of business, went bankrupt and went out of business, and we had to get a second contractor to come in, and something was amiss in the aligning of something, but literally there is a wall that bows. If Jim Odell was here, he could have told you.
I think we could
the
do
whole
those.
thing.
That's good enough.
Unfortunately, you got me.
That's good enough for me.
I'm on the building committee.
So, Jen, you're available on the 24th.
I can do all.
Would anyone have any objections to trying to do the 3 fire departments on the 24th if they're available? And I'm only asking these so we could try to
Yeah.
email and get a kind of a pre-schedule.
And what I would suggest is for the 3rd, if possible, I think we could cover the police station and the senior center. All right, so we can take that, try to work that out, and that obviously subject to the availability of the department heads.
So March 3rd, you plan on the police
And the
station and
And
the senior center.
if they're
And March 24th, the 3 fire stations.
correct. In the schools, we would do on the 10th, correct. Great, thank you.
I'll send out an email and I'll copy you on it. Thank you.
Okay, item 7 is the minute meetings. I think the only one that we haven't approved, we're doing well so far, is the February 15th that Mike had sent to us via email, and there's a copy here.
This is double-sided. I'm paying for this, so I'm trying to cut down on paper. I'm on the budget committee. I'm trying to be resourceful. Fine. Bless you.
Could submit for that.
once people have digested it, if I can entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, comments?
I'd like to say that the person that's doing those is doing a very good job.
I'll second.
Yeah, right. Give me a second. Can you smile for the camera?
Learning.
But your term is young.
That's right. You're setting a good precedent for yourself. Don't let yourself down. So, all in favor of approving the minutes from the February 15th, 2018? We have unanimous. Thank you. Are there any documents that to be distributed? I know we handed out at the beginning the budget docket that Mrs. Mello provided for us.
This isn't on a document, but I do have a question, I'm sorry. I should have raised this when you were speaking about the site visits, and I'm wondering if there is any interest with the Budget Committee, because our recreational sites could use a site visit in themselves. The recreation coordinator, when he spoke before the council, mentioned the playground areas at the town farm, that there are a lot of, that equipment is in really disrepair, that he's going to try to put together a plan to get maybe some funding and some grants together, but I know it's asking a lot, because the Budget Committee does have to go to, our facilities are very important to us, but so is our recreational facilities, and especially that town farm area. So if anybody's in that kind of line that looks at this stuff, it might, if you could just give some time, maybe we could get the maintenance director or the DPW to go around with you, because we do pay, that's a good chunk of the budget as well, going to mowing these and rehabilitating the fields, things like that. And it is good oversight to know this is exactly where all that money is going, and because there's an ever constant need for it. It's just a suggestion or a request. Thanks.
But on that note, you said they're working on a plan. They don't have a list of current deficiencies or anything like that, do they?
No, they're very much aware of the town farm playground area. There's also that playground area up at Bulgamash Park, up that end. And, these equipments, they're always, and some are really, because they're going to have to remove them if they aren't able to get, they're not requesting any funds this year. They said they're going to try to get a full, idea of where the funding would come from, if they're able to get some private funds, maybe some donations, some grants. But it is a town property, and we should be looking out for some of them, so.
Can you ask them when they would be available? Like,
Sure.
would they possibly be available the 31st?
March 31st?
Is that it?
But that would be after the budget process is completed, though, as well, right?
Well,
It's after it's submitted, right?
but we're still working.
We're still working on it.
But you're still working
We're
on
still-
it, okay. All right, yes, I will. I will
Okay.
try to speak with him or the DPW. I don't know who the best person to go around to these would be, but I'll try to get someone.
I don't know how many hundreds of hours I've spent there. It's a lot.
Great. Okay, no documents. I have. The other category, is there other business that committee members would like to bring before this august body? I'll send it around. I haven't, if I have it right, I'll double check with Mrs. Mello, but the town, the financial town referendum, it specifies when the referendum will take place, which is the third Saturday, and then everything is backed into dates by 14 days prior, 21 and all. So I did out a table, and I just want to double check it, but I'll share it with everyone so that we have some sense of what all of the pieces are that are coming to us. So we'll do that. And then I'll work with Mrs. Mello to find out which departments will be ready, that have been before the town council, who are ready to talk with us about where their budgets are. But for the next couple of weeks, we're gonna have to do more than what we've been covering. Just came to that realization, to make sure we get through all of these accounts so that it's still the opportunity in terms of questions and decisions that can be made. So a number of them will probably be like tonight, where they're relatively, and I don't want to shortchange anyone, but relatively short, and we can look at what the budgets are as we go through them. There's a couple of biggies, and Cecil had asked me if we could, we'll do the invitation. So the police pension plan, last year we had, there's a professional investment firm that will come and talk about what the assumptions are in the plan. Very helpful. There was a document that was presented to us, and many of the assumptions about returns and for things that, well, I think would be wise. And then another one, and I don't know, Mrs. Mello, to do with the school or Mrs. Black in terms of asking the school to come, and whether, do we do that directly, or is that, again, another, you've been so helpful in facilitating things, but I want to make sure.
You mean for a date, then you
either
give the
one.
school? I'm sure Sally's liaison, she'll relay it.
Okay, so I'll do, what I was thinking in terms of the dates is perhaps the 8th, to have the school come in. And that next week, and again, it'll be subject to finding out from Mrs. Mellows to see if we can't get somewhere, 7 or 8 of these or more of these other accounts to go forward. They also request that the auditors, I think it was one, is whether, I don't know if the accounting firm comes in and does that, or whether that's the treasurer. Can you?
Well, no, I think the audit firm will come in. As far as the actuary for the police pension, and if you're asking for the auditor, those dates are gonna have to fit in when they're able to come. So I will, if you want, contact them.
Yes,
and
please.
Email you I'll have to give them a couple of dates.
Great. Well, what we would have.
Around them, just because they're not always ready on demand for us.
Great. So obviously that today's the 22nd, next week is, so the 1st, the 8th, or the 15th. I think trying to get in, those are biggies that we would get in, and then, not to diminish anyone else, but backfill with a lot of the other town accounts, I think would be the way to go. And it's the 17th is that the date, as I mentioned before, St. Patrick's Day, where the budget and the revenue things need to be in to us from the town administrator. And then one question that I have, and maybe Mrs. Mello, you can help me. So if the police pension is a line item that there are decisions that could be made on that, recommendations to the budget committee about what to fund. One question is thinking about, and I'm on page 6 of the docket, was looking at the ER, SRI pension accounts and those requests. And the question is are those contractual?
All the rest of the, that is actually set by the state. We're in the state pensions. So there should be some backup in here, but if it's not, I will prepare this,
Okay.
all this backup. You can put it on anytime you want, and I will submit the,
So this would be an item
it's
that.
all on the, now they don't send those forms that they used to send before, but you just go online and get it, so I will
Okay.
submit that. In fact, the treasurer and I were working on some of those numbers ourselves. Of course, it depends on the salaries and stuff, but those are set percentages.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, so it's
Set
essentially
percentages.
the town
Because-
opted into the state system, so it's almost like the state's an outside vendor in that regard, and this is just their price.
And that's
So-
right. And they asked that in. And you're gonna notice that some of them, particularly the fire department, that one, really, the percentage has increased of the pensions.
Great.
So we can bring that, you can put that on whenever you want.
Okay, so I think for the committee, and partly it was my trying to noodle through this as something that it would be good for us to understand what it is, but I don't think we can mess with the numbers. It's almost like some of the contractual, the bond payments and things like that. Whereas the decision looking at the police pension fund, there's been a plan that's been put in place and all, but that, as I understand it, is a decision point for us as a committee. So we gotta giddy up is the official term.
So in scheduling departments, I'm wondering, are we going to, at any point, hear anything about casino estimates and such?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, what was it about?
Casino.
Oh,
Right.
casino.
Yeah, if you'd like, I can get something prepared.
Because presumably it'd be in the revenue side of the budget, right?
Yeah, but it wouldn't, yeah, it would be well, we're not sure when we're getting the money, actually, because if they don't open, say they open in October, we're not gonna get a payout for a little bit. It's a schedule, and if you want me to discuss all that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be really
I'm not
helpful.
prepared tonight, but.
No, not
No,
tonight,
not
but
yet.
was
You wanna do
it-
it? I would like to follow up on something, if that's okay.
Yep, sure.
All right.
We're in the other category.
It's another category, is that right?
Yeah, we're in that category.
We're in the category of others, so bring
We're in
other.
the other part of the agenda.
So, we talked about the air bottles. So what I did was I requested all the air bottles, every air bottle we have, and all the expiration dates. We are behind, but we do have some that are up to date. So what the council decided was we are going to buy we're going to buy 25 bottles on this year's budget. We went through all the line items. Nancy and I finished it up this afternoon, and I have an inventory of all the air bottles. So what we're going to do is buy half the bottles this year, the 25, put in 25 for the next one. And then, as we're looking at it, he actually needs more than he anticipated. So then I was thinking we should put the rest of it for the following year, so that not every year we're buying 68 bottles. So if we buy 25 this year, we don't have to replace them for 10 years.
So
If we, so
this year, you mean fiscal 19?
the budget I'm working on now, we're going to buy 25. So the budget that we're actually functioning with. So we went through every single line item and we found $25,000 that we feel we'll have in excess in different accounts. So I'm sorry, I just came from a class, so my mind's kind of boggled. But the budget that we're working on now would be 18, 19. I'm talking about the 17, 18 budget, we're going to buy 25.
So this year?
This year.
You're purchasing
Yes.
this year
Current fiscal year,
and
Yes.
and planning.
And that's from a little excess from not having an administrator here for 2 months, not having a planner. We're taking a little bit from each account. So it's not from found money, it's just money that's been there that we're going to use. Also, the defibrillator, I got an inventory of his defibrillators, and we're hoping to buy him a Zoll on this budget.
So this year?
This year. So we've been working on both those. I do have an inventory of all the air bottles. If you want to see them, I can give you that at a later date. But that's what I thought would be the best plan, and I'm presenting that in front of the council on Monday.
So
Okay.
are the expiration dates such that you can't break it up over 10 years?
Believe it or not, Justin, there's some air bottles that we shouldn't even be using, quite a bit of air bottles right now that are totally expired. Because what happened was, in 2004, they got a grant to replace all the air bottles, and they never, so then I found out, and you probably know this, when you buy an air pack, you get an air bottle. So when he bought the 19 air packs last year, he got 19 air bottles. So we do have, I think I counted 19 that are fine, that are absolutely fine, that we bought last year. So we bought 19 last year, 25 this year, 25 next year, and whatever we need, and really spread it out so that we don't get this, oh my God, we need every single air bottle we ever
Well, that's what
had.
I'm asking. So 25 works out to be about the least you can buy in order to catch up with what we need to catch up with?
Yeah, 25 is realistic for this budget we are currently in. I don't think we're gonna find much more money for.
How many are there total?
Well, it's 3, so I've learned so much about this weekend, I could do this. Every fireman can only stay in a fire with 3 air bottles. Once they get to that 3 air bottle limit, they can no longer go in the fire. And correct me if I'm wrong. So we have 27.
We'll take 3.
Well, it's 3 national, whatever. So if you get 3 times 27, that's how many air bottles we really need. But I mean, realistically, you're not going to have every 27 men at the fire, and they're going to go in 3 times with air bottles.
But now and then,
What?
now and then there's 9/11.
Right, so
You
in
wanna- you wanna
preparation.
get the-
But what I'm saying is, I think this plan will work.
Yeah, but one thing to keep in mind though too, and this is something you guys can ask the fire stations on your visits, it's a 45 air pack, and it lasts roughly half an hour.
Right.
It also depends on how much you're exerting. You can
Right.
blow through a 30-minute air pack in 10 minutes.
Right.
You
It all
got it.
depends on the guy, and it all
And if
depends
they're
on how
not
many
getting
men you
physicals.
have at the fire. When you have mutual aid, I would imagine those firemen come with their own air packs. So it would be just our men fighting the fire.
But it would seem the ideal pattern would be something like 8 a year. and then
It
they'd
would,
be-
but at this point, we have to catch up. At this point, right, at this point, you really have to catch up on this, because we
And
are.
25 is about the lowest
25
tolerable number to catch up.
Yeah, we still are nowhere near caught up, but I'm gonna tell them buy it exactly July 1st, because we need to get some of these replaced. And if it just so happens at the end of the year, we do have some money, well, I would feel that's one of our priorities, to do that. But, there's some counts that are running pretty.
But then in 10 years, you'll have to have the 3 years.
It won't be 10, it'll be within 4 years, or 3 years will be.
So this makes a lot more sense than what we were hearing the other night.
Right, and,
Number one, but number two, then, let's drop the other shoe. How are they budgeting Scott's air packs and the like in the past? I mean, we have a personal protective gear account, we have a
I'm still looking into all of that. and I'm-
apparatus maintenance account. Should we not put these things in one of those accounts to make sure that they really get funded? Or, don't get lost in the shuffle again?
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that for
Should be
next,
like,
yeah.
did the police cars.
Or have their own
So
account?
many
I don't
years,
know.
so many-
Well, Alex, we are on our way to doing that now that we're aware of the problem. And I know I didn't know a lot of this. I didn't know this. We really didn't know the extent of this problem as far as the town
We got
council.
blindsided.
Yeah, I got very
The whole
blindsided.
town did, so.
So that's the plan for that anyway, and we're gonna work on it. I know what you're saying. Realistically, we should have bought 10 every year, but that's not what occurred. And now we're in a situation now that we have to buy them as
So
soon as
maybe
we
the
can.
next cycle, go to 10 a year.
I'm hoping, but
Right,
anyway.
But we're on a plan that in this current fiscal year, FY '18, the town council, you're saying has the ability to buy 25. And then there's the request for FY '19, the one that we're
I
considering
think it's
right
like
here.
25.5.
Another 25,000, right, 25.5 that would be in there, so.
Can't believe I remembered that, but
25
yeah.
on this budget, right?
So,
So, and it's roughly, they're $1,000 each, correct? So we're talking.
that's what I
about-
understand.
Right. So fairly quickly, right, within.
I think he said 5,000 for the full.
But then keep in mind, I didn't look into the air pack situation, because we might be replacing air packs next year. And if we are, then we get a bottle with every air pack. So we just have to look to see what's gonna happen as it goes on. But now that we understand it, and I'm gonna explain it to the council on Monday, that's what I'm gonna propose as the plan. I hope, and we did talk about it on Saturday, that we would try to find the ability to buy the air bottles this year, some of them anyway, so that we could start taking care of the problem. Okay?
Great,
Thank you.
Mr. Coach?
This is the mistake we've made for a long time here. We buy everything at once, and it all dies at once, just like Fall River. The fire trucks should all be placed out. Every 5 years, buy one. Ambulance is the same thing, so that they don't all fall apart at the same year. Four Rivers going through it now, they've bought, I don't know, 8 or 9 brand-new pumpers. They're all gonna die at the same time.
Yeah.
Spread them out.
Stagger.
Plows.
That's what we're working on, and if we were aware of this, we would have tried to do it, but now that we are, we're being proactive and
Great.
we're trying to fix the problem.
All right, there's no other new business or other business before us. I'll entertain. Motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? All opposed?